Hello, my name is Aubrey, and this presentation will focus on the Australian eucalypt woodlands in New South Wales. So, we are looking at the area in New South Wales. It is the southeastern part of Australia. In the photo below, we will focus on the dry sclerophyll woodland in the southeast region of New South Wales. The dry woodland is opposed to the wet woodland in the northeast blue region, where they are wetter, but also the blue region is more mixed with rainforest, making that sclerophyll woodland more wet than usual. Sclerophyll describes a system that is dominated by evergreen species with leathery leaves, in this case eucalyptus. Dry sclerophyll forests are two-tiered as opposed to wet that are three-tiered in vegetation structure. So this first photo on the left shows a more dry area of a dry sclerophyll woodland where there is a grass tier and then a higher tree tier. And then this next photo on the right shows a more wet dry sclerophyll woodland. There are many animal and plant species that reside in the dry sclerophyll eucalypt woodlands in New South Wales. There is a dominance of eucalyptus, including blue-leaved stringy bark, which is this first photo in the middle column, white stringy bark eucalyptus, and silver-top ash, which is the second photo in the middle column. There's also shrubs like broad-leaved hickory and several kinds of wattle. Wattle is this first photo in the bottom left corner. And the second photo here is of a forb called curly wig. For animal species, there are large grazers like kangaroos, medium-sized browsers like wombats, this photo in the top right corner, and wallabies and arboreal species like koalas and possums. There are also many bird species, including owls, parrots, and rosellas. The dry eucalypt woodlands are lower in stature with more open understories. As discussed earlier, it's two-tiered. The dry sclerophyll produces less biomass due to a decrease in moisture, thus decreasing the amount of fall than seen in wet sclerophyll woodlands. The fire regime, I think, is similar to ones we see in ponderosa pine forests, where there are frequent low-severity brush fires and can range in intervals from 3 to 10 years. Intense crown fires can occur under drier conditions, and a common ignition source for these systems are lightning. Looking at this photo of the charred bases of the eucalyptus trees, we can see where the fire got to, and it wasn't very high, and it mainly affected the understory species. Pre-colonization of New South Wales area consisted of Australian Aboriginals that used fire to their advantage and shaped the fire regime. In dry eucalypt woodlands, they would burn in mid to late summer on 3-year intervals. 50% of the resulting vegetation makeup was made of plant materials like roots and herbaceous species that benefited from this fire regime. Fire was also used as a hunting technique to draw out the mammals from certain areas. Where to burn was based on local knowledge and observations on where it was needed. Post-European establishment, we start to see establishments of fire suppression strategies like volunteer fire brigades and legislation from the Fire Brigades Act. Fire prevention methods were continued into early to mid 1900s, where the fire brigades became more organized and fires began to be managed under their control. In the 1950s and 60s, there were severe fires from increased winds and hotter temperatures that eventually led to the creation of the position of Chief Coordinator of Brush Firefighting that gave more power to operate across more boundaries under different jurisdictions. Severe fires were then again experienced in the 70s and 80s that killed some and injured many. A formal firefighting training system was established from this. Going into the current day, fires continued to increase in severity as shown through the Black Summer fires, which we will be discussing later. Plants in this ecosystem are adapted to survive fire, and some characteristics of these species actually promote an environment that increases wildfire probability. Eucalyptus and other species carry highly flammable oils and waxes, as well as create extensive amounts of flammable materials like shedding bark or dry leaves. Because of this increased flammability of the site, many species are adapted to survive fire. Characteristics include insulated bark, woody seed capsules that protect the seeds, and prolific epicormic resprouting in the higher canopy that helps outcompete basal resprouters. Many species are mobile and are able to escape the area that is on fire. In lower severity brush fires, koalas climb up the trees to avoid the fires. Rodents and lizards can also tunnel underground to escape fire. Many species are adapted to fire and prefer post-fire areas due to more nutritional value in sprouts and better habitat. In a study done by Lane et al., they found higher nitrogen levels in epicormic sprouts in eucalyptus. They also found that burned areas make better habitat for koalas. The fire regime leads to a patchy mosaic that animals prefer, as well as snags and downed logs. As we have already seen in recent fires in Australia, we know that climate change is going to cause extended, increased temperatures, which dries the high fuel amounts faster in both wet and dry sclerophyll forests. With this, there is wide-scale concern that fire-adapted species are slowly decreasing their capacity to recover after fires. Climate-induced increases in hot, dry westerly winds also creates conditions for uninterrupted fire weather. Dense regrowth is more flammable than old forests, so the increasing amount of severe wildfires with climate change could increase in frequency with the resulting vegetation structure. Looking at the long-term impacts of climate change, broader scale vegetation composition and structure changes are expected. Reduction in growth and seed recruitment from hydraulic stress and drought periods could result in a change in structure. Eucalyptus trees have been found to regenerate seedlings through the moist litter layer, but increased dry conditions dries out the litter layer, decreasing the ability for seedling reestablishment. In 2019-2020, the Black Summer brush fires are a good example to look at how climate change is affecting the fire regime. In August, they started their fire season, which was historically earlier than usual because of the drought disturbance New South Wales was already experiencing. This caused for a prolonged fire season with dry fuels. In addition, there were too many dry fuels to manage, as well as a lack of fuels management in the first place. Logging operations in the area also were a cause of these fires, as dense overgrowth following logging operations is more flammable than older stands, also known as the landscape trap hypothesis. And just showing you some stats from the New South Wales EPA, in these fires, 5.5 million hectares burnt. 3 billion animals were burnt or displaced, and I'm sure some of you saw some of the photos online during this time where some of the koala bears were on fire in these areas, and it was really devastating and sad. There was also a 50% increase in fire-generated thunderstorms that brought more lightning that could cause more ignitions. And 62% of all vegetation with a fire history was found to be under pressure from too much burning, because since these fires, the fire interval has increased. When large smoke plumes are formed from wildfires, they release nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, particulate matter, and various hydrocarbons. This creates a circular system where forest fires and smoke are increased by climate change, and the pollutants released during fires increases the effects of climate change. Particularly in the Black Summer fires, the smoke pollutants were injected into the troposphere and sometimes at some points in the stratosphere. This allowed smoke particles to be transported across the Pacific into South America. It also deposited iron in oceans, which stimulates growth of phytoplankton. There are also several health impacts to the public from smoke, which could lead to mortality depending on severity, age, and other factors. For current and future management, the government has adopted a policy to support Aboriginal cultural burning. However, most of their current and future management focuses on fire suppression activities. There has been a lot of money following the 2020 fires spent on trail maintenance and increasing access to homes, an increasing push for technology to predict lightning ignition strikes to allow for more rapid response to remote areas, and an increasing amount of firefighter personnel being trained and hired. The main forms of fuels reduction being practiced currently are near homes in terms of defensible space. And currently, there might be too many remote areas to reduce fuels, while climate change is increasingly drawing them in historically wet areas. And that concludes the end of my presentation, and I hope I was able to teach you something about this part of the world. Thank you. And these are my references.